104.7 The Cave, KKLH, Marshfield, Springfield. Broadcasting pure classic rock from the Just One More studio in beautiful Midtown Springfield. It's Ned Talk, your local live sports show.
Sports talk for imbeciles. I hate that show.
Now, here's Ned.
Ah, yes, here we are back in the studio again for another Monday night of Sports Talk. It is our roundtable local live sports show known as Ned Talk. It's called Ned Talk because Ned Reynolds, our sports roustabout, is sitting in the studio with us. Ned, how are you today?
Doing just great, thank you. The wind has come out of the north. The sun is out. It is a very pleasant August evening.
Thank for the Ron Hurst drop there.
I just thought I'd throw a little weather in here for what it's worth.
This is not a weather show, by the way.
It is not. That's the last time we're going to mention it, too.
All right,
the very last.
I'm Joe Westen, by the way. Sitting across from me is Stormy Davis. Stormy, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day outside. Little warm working in the shop, but hey, it's beautiful out there. I like it.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. And sitting directly across from me, back by popular demand, in the studio for the first time in a little while, in all his glory, John Oliver. John, how are you?
And his hair.
I'm doing great, thanks. I'm very happy we've got sports back, and it feels a little normal with sports.
It does
back.
feel a little bit normal. I'm going to have to mess around with your microphone because something doesn't seem right over there, and I'm going to have to check around with that for just a second. But I also have a surprise for everybody because Josh Roberts is joining us via the telephone. Josh, how are you?
Hi, I'm coming to you live from the Bat Cave.
The Bat Cave. That's what you call your basement, isn't it?
You betcha.
All right, so the big story in all of sports for the last week, since we've not shared our thoughts with people, is just totally been college football. So let's start there. The SEC released at least one game today, and it's kind of exciting for people that live in Missouri. Stormy, tell us about that.
Well, the SEC has released actually the opening weekend schedule, and one of the better ones, of course, me and Josh, big Alabama fans, they will be coming up to Columbia to face Mizzou.
Roll Tide.
I think I'm on here, but I'm not sure. But regardless of that, it is a very big game. It was not originally on Missouri's schedule. It's an addition because of the Southeastern Conference scheme of things, and it'll be a nice little test. Eli Drinkwitz, who is the new head football coach at Mizzou, is going to have his work cut out for him. Facing now we're on. Very good, very good.
There he is.
You had blunted the mics there.
It was just a little subconscious.
Anyway, the bottom line is this: that was not originally a Missouri game. In fact, I don't think Alabama's on their schedule for another 3 or 4 years. No. I think on the rotation basis. So they do come in for the opener. Coach Drinkwitz, who is very high on the Missouri team, is going to have a pretty good little test in his opening game, which isn't, guys, until September the 26th. Right. And now this is it dates me, but back in my days in school, that's when we opened the season, in the last week in September.
Yep. Yeah. But open late. And then the rest of the schedule will come out tonight at 7 p.m.
Okay. But there's not everybody.
Right now.
Sorry, what was that, Josh?
I'm going to say 52-10 Alabama in that game.
All right.
There we go. I like that one.
Roll Tide out a score. Let's discuss this because not everybody's playing college football this year. There was
right.
Who all's canceled now at this point?
At this point, it is the Big Ten and Pac-12. They've canceled out completely. There have been Mountain West is also included, and then some FCS or Division I AA conferences. In fact, most of them: Missouri Valley Conference, Southland, the Patriot League, which always sends a couple of teams to the playoffs. It's kind of a mixed bag, so to speak. But it's enough so that the FCS or Division I AA ball clubs really can't play other than non-conference. Right. And because of that, I'm sure the Southland Conference made their decision a couple of weeks ago, but it wasn't decided until earlier this week, or last week, I should say. I think that the Bears got a bit of a preview that might happen, so not only are they playing Oklahoma, they're playing Central Arkansas twice, home and home. And the first game will be down in Conway, and the second game will be here in Springfield in October sometime. That's pretty good. Central Arkansas, guys, was to have been Missouri's first game.
Okay.
So obviously that's out. And Missouri's first game, they're going from Central Arkansas to Alabama. Thank you.
So the other,
different game plan.
so the ACC is still playing, correct?
The ACC is also
so far.
playing along with the Big 12 and and of course the
SEC.
SEC. Of course, all three
I
of
think
them.
the Mid-Atlantic Conference was one of the first conferences to cancel their season.
Well, yeah, and there may be. I think there are other factors involved, but the SWAC and the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, the Patriot League, and the Colonial Athletic Conference, to which the kingpin there is James Madison. That was the runner-up to national champion North Dakota State last year. They're all gone now. Whether or not they have non-conference games, that I don't know. The Big Sky. Big Sky is also gone. That's why Montana is not coming down here. So it's created a maelstrom in all of college football to do this. Whether or not it's the right decision, well, the experts seem to think that it is.
Ned, has the MSU made any kind of statements about fans or people at the games yet?
They have not. Of course, there's only going to be one game, and it'll be the homecoming game on the 27th of October, I believe it is. No, I'm sorry, it's the 17th of October. So the one game, and I believe it's at night. Now, what they'll do is probably allow 20% capacity. That's what most of them are doing. I know that's what Oklahoma plans on doing for their first game. Now, 20% of capacity at Norman, Oklahoma is about, I'm going to guess, somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 or 15,000.
I would
Probably.
say 15, yeah.
So it's all it'll somehow rectify itself. How? Who knows? I do know the Cardinals lead the Chicago Cubs going into the last of the seventh inning, 3-1, and it is a 7-inning game.
Let me ask you this. Clarify something for me. So Missouri State only has one home game. Have all the rest of their games been canceled by the teams that they would be playing?
No, they could play. Now, all the rest of their games are conference games, and the conference has shut down. They're not going to play any conference games at all.
Okay.
They could conceivably add another game in there, maybe somebody from the Southland Conference, Sam Houston State or a Abilene Christian or somebody like that, conceivably. But they're not going to, because you have to understand, they plan on playing in the spring. And you can't have too many games in the fall and not risk some sort of injury, because your space, your chronological space, is not all that great. Mm-hmm. So there are decisions to be made, and then the next one that's going to come to the fore is basketball and the winter sports. What's going to happen there?
Josh, since you're joining us and you're our SEC expert, what's your thoughts about all this?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think it would have been better for all of college football to not play until possibly spring. I think that's what they probably should have done, just to be safe, because the problem is they're still seeing some small pockets of outbreak, even with the safety measures they say they have in place. And then I saw an interview with Orgeron, the LSU coach, and he said he wants the stadium to be half capacity. Well, at LSU, that's 50,000 people, half capacity. So that's not going to work, And so, I mean, if they can keep the players and personnel safe, and if they can play without the fans in the stadium, I think that's their best case scenario at this point, if they're adamant about playing.
Well, I agree with you, Josh, 100%. And I'm going to tell you, the current thinking is spring football. Well, we can just play in the spring. I hate that idea. And I'll tell you why, too, guys. It's not because spring isn't conducive to sports. It is. You're having baseball and basketball. It really crowds the schedule, number one. But over and above all that, you are asking college football players to play 10 or 11 games in the spring and then have them come back 4 months later? I don't think so, sports fans. That ain't going to work.
I think you're probably right. And like I said, I think maybe it would be better if
Uh-oh.
You're breaking up a little bit there, Josh. What was it you said?
Maybe it would be better if they just lost the whole season.
Yeah, but
just to be safe.
And that certainly is a point I would think of consideration. But think of the money, and the money factor has to be considered here. This is you may be somebody who thinks that money doesn't count or it shouldn't ever be a factor, but it is. Yep. Come on, this is big business, folks. Do you sacrifice health? Of course not. You don't sacrifice a person's safety. But again, there is debate as to how much sacrifice is being made.
Well, the question, though, that comes in for me on this is apparently the universities, which have a huge actuary department who sit there and figure out things about how much money they would bring in. But what's the potential that they could lose in lawsuits and liability if something does go incredibly wrong? And the actuaries have said, you're going to end up on the wrong side of that deal.
And that is precisely why the Big Ten and the Pac-12 have abandoned football for this year, because of the potential of a lawsuit. It's a liability lawsuit that they're looking out for. Yeah, they have had to my knowledge, no major COVID-19 outbreaks among any of those teams. They did earlier with the Pac-12, but I think that's probably been resolved by now. But some of the doctors have come out and said there could be long-term effects from COVID-19, and they talk about some heart problems. Guys, I happen to know from the limited amount of medicine that I've been involved in the Navy that almost all viral attacks have after effects with some people. Mm-hmm. Yep. One of them's myocarditis. It's an inflammation of the heart muscle. Well, you can recover from it, of course. Most people do. But it also takes a while to do that, maybe 3 to 6 months before you could start with active athletic competition again. But you also have the possibility of 5 years down the line, somebody has some kind of catastrophic ailment of some sort, and some individual, I won't name the profession, but says, it's COVID-19 related. And they take it to court, and you have millions and millions of dollars being tossed around. Those are considerations that have to be made.
Well, I think you can expect that to happen in the future as well. I don't think it's speculating. I think that, as far as later on with potential launch.
Josh, you need to adjust your tinfoil hat a little bit. You're still breaking up a little bit on us.
Okay. What about now?
You're better. You're better now. I can hear you now.
Okay, cool. I think all of that is going to happen. I think it's inevitable that there will be lawsuits down the line. So I kind of agree with what Joe was saying. If they've sat down and thought about the monetary
we're losing
litigation.
I'm afraid, Josh, that we're in a disrupted level of communications here.
It's COVID-19 that's causing
that's
this.
What it is.
Let's just say that. Josh
is more disrupted than normal.
Thanks for joining us. We'll continue to talk, but hopefully we'll get you on a better line in the next couple of weeks, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you, man.
All right. Let's talk just briefly about, I think, the point that Josh was making, but something that I wanted to make, too. We live in a litigious society.
Very much
obviously.
so.
Yes.
So obviously there's going to be lawsuits the other way too. You didn't allow me to play. I could have had a potential earnings. So this is just we've talked about this every week. It's like a broken record.
One balances the other, as a matter of fact, and you're absolutely right.
And nobody's prepared for this. There's no playbook.
There's the answer.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
the problem presented to us in certainly mental form, and that there is no formula to follow. Exactly. I know the kid from Ohio State, their quarterback, has gotten a petition up and gotten something like 75,000 people to sign the thing to bring Big Ten football back in, put it back in place again. Well, I mean, this is not going to happen, no, because once the athletic directors and college presidents and so forth have made a decision, it is probably going to stand. But it does present a very acrimonious circumstance in terms of what could happen, what doesn't happen. Bottom line is this. This is the first time ever in history that college football has been disrupted, just like this. Yeah. All the world wars, all the pandemics of the past, the Spanish flu, all the others, never. And now this time, why this time? Let's mull that over in our next segment.
Money.
Why is it happening this time?
Yeah. Well, we'll figure it out. Maybe. I don't know. We usually don't, but we toss around some
We'll
good
give it a
ideas.
shot.
It is Ned Talk. We're coming to you live from the studios. If you've got a question, give us a call, 863-7104.
Ned is in the house.
Technology, huh? 3 steps forward, 4 steps back.
It's Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
Yep, that's right. Ned Talk. We're talking sports, kind of. Technology has failed us tonight with Josh Roberts. We were not able to continue that conversation with Josh. We'll blame his cell phone carrier. We'll just say he's got one of those. He's got a cricket. That was
cricket?
what he was calling on a cricket.
That works.
Let's talk a little baseball.
No.
No.
Wait a minute. What's going
We're
now?
discussing college football and why the season is disrupted for the first time in history. Fire away, man. What do you think?
When you look at this overall, and, Joe, Ned, you both alluded to this, it's unprecedented times in a lot of ways. It's what's happening right now. You mentioned other disasters, other situations that the country's been in. It's an unprecedented hot political time combined with an unprecedented illness that is sweeping. So I think those two factors combined, I don't know, if it was one or the other. I don't know that you'd see the reaction necessarily that we're seeing, but things are just so uncertain in people's lives. I think there's such an outcry for these sports to be put on hold until the public deems that it is safe to continue on.
Well, I'm going to say one word here, and before you all jump on my case for saying this, but media, but not because of the press. Now, wait a minute. Mm-hmm. It's because of access to information and this 24/7 inundation of what comes at us.
And you have a major backing on my part. I think that's when you talk about past years, let's talk about the Spanish flu, the Asian flu. When I was in school, it ravaged schools, still played. The World War I, World War II, all of the conflicts that we've had, and college sports was still there. Mm-hmm. Professional sports was still there, but suddenly we have to shut it down. The virus is very nasty, no question about that. There is no vaccine for it. We have lost, I think, 170,000. I must admit, I don't know how that compares to past pandemics. But what did we not have back then that we do now? 24 hours of drilling into your mind every single negativity that exists in the world. And that's what's going on with not just TV news, but with any kind of broadcast and with papers. And reporters pick up on the negative aspect of things and drill it into your mind.
You bring up a good point, Ned. And, you are talking about the equivalent to every human in at least the United States and most of the world basically having an automatic news ticker that is in their pocket that they can talk to other people from. And, that being said, I think we can all agree there's information that gets out there that is valid. There's information that gets out that's not valid. You have different news organizations warring with each other, which we haven't seen in the past. So it is an unprecedented time in that regard, too, where you just don't see, I harken back to yellow journalism back in the
early 1900s,
right.
With William Randolph Hearst,
Yes.
and Joseph Pulitzer and all those people, yes.
You just don't hear that sort of thing. And, we live in a time where if something's reported incorrectly, you might get a small retraction, maybe at the bottom of a page or if at all.
Back with the grocery ads.
The
Right.
key is might. You might not, too. There might not be any. And the same thing can happen in the electronic form of journalism. Somebody makes a mistake. Are you held accountable for it? No. They just go right on. And as a result, a lot of this is absorbed by the public's, the mental aspect of the individuals who are listening and reading and so forth, and it begins to develop into a negative aspect on things. That is not to say, please don't misunderstand, not to say that it is not a dangerous circumstance.
Oh, absolutely.
But is it any more dangerous than anything else we've ever had? I will argue that point.
Well, I think we make a mistake where we kind of think that the times that we live in are unique.
True.
And they're not. History has this way of repeating itself. My wife was telling me the story the other day about when the Spanish flu was happening, and that There were maskers and anti-maskers and people who were adamant about I'm not going to wear a mask and people who were like you should wear a mask, and that there was a group of people that decided, you know what, we're going to wear masks. We're going to try to curb this. We're going to flatten the curve, as we say today. And they wore masks for 30 days, and the curve had flattened. And then they all took off their masks, and they all went back to their lives, and Spanish flu came back.
Yep.
And nothing's changed. The one thing that amazes me is just how stupid we are as people. We just don't ever seem to learn. We're just like, yeah, whatever. We're just going along doing our thing.
And some of us like to be high achievers.
Yeah, it's stupidity. It's just. And I think the press. I think if you go back to certain time, people would say the press was bad. They would blame the media. They blame the press. And I think that's an easy target because when you read something you don't like, damn press.
Sure.
I think that's just universally true. The question as to why everything's stopped now, I think our society is more litigious now than it's ever been.
yes.
I think that's
Oh my
new.
God, yes.
And I think there's also a new, I don't really know what to call it. I think there's this new wave of maybe preciousness that we have with things, and some of that's good and some of it's bad. And we don't, as Americans, we seem to have trouble striking balances.
Oh,
Yeah.
Joe,
Yes.
you're again, you bring up very good points, but I will tell you this. I lived through polio epidemic, the Asian flu epidemic, and any other epidemics that's come forth, and I made it, and I'm 79 years old. Now, am I the special one? No, of course not. Almost everybody does, and we did not shut down. Yes, we do live in a different time, a time when we're almost afraid to do anything, afraid to get out of bed in the morning because, well, you're taking a risk. You take a risk by doing anything in life. That's part of living. You don't shut down living just because there is a problem in society.
But as always, you have to strike some sort of balance.
No,
And
there is a
I find that
Very much so.
something that's really interesting to me, and it especially occurs with Dr. Fauci. Whenever a reporter asks him a question, or whoever asks him a question, that becomes almost the story du jour of the day.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
Dr. Fauci, do you think that there'll be a cure to COVID? Yes, I do. Dr. Fauci, could you see COVID going on into next year? Yes, I do. And then stories are written based on those ideas.
Correct.
And he's right about both of them. And they are news stories, but it just, you know what?
Which
Really,
story, Joe, takes precedence?
well, it's just the question that the person asks and who wants to, you can say whatever. You've worked in news, Ned. You know that you've sat in a
Too
news.
damn many years.
You've sat in a newsroom where somebody said, "What's our slant on this?"
Exactly.
And that's happened for years.
And
What's
the problem
slant?
in it is they put a slant on it rather than just the old-fashioned.
It is not.
There's
what,
no-
where, why.
Who,
I disagree
what,
with you,
why,
Stormy.
where, and when has gone out. Nobody
Well,
asked
I
that.
disagree with you both on that because I think it's gone out a lot. It went out when it first somebody wrote that down and said, "This is what we should do," and somebody looked at it and goes, "Yeah, right."
Well,
And that there's always been a slant because the bottom line to anything is selling newspapers, getting people to watch.
Ad time.
If you don't, we're doing it right now.
Yeah.
We do it right now, and we're sponsorless, by the way.
You'd
like to sponsor Ned Talk, please get in touch with
we do, but this is altogether different because this is recreation. This is what people want to hear. This is part of the.
People want to hear this.
What the hell's so funny with that? This is the dessert, as I was always told, of any kind of newscast. This is the recreation for people. Do you want to hear negativity? No, you do not, and that's why it is kept off. At least we blunt it a little bit. But in news, come on, it is completely out of line, in my opinion, completely out of line. The case that you brought up, where you make the comparison, Fauci says there will be a vaccine. Yeah, okay. Well, we might have it next year. Oh, God, write that, because that'll have them stirred up.
But they wrote the same story. They wrote a different story the day before where he said that there could be a cure. And so I think it depends on how you take everything too. As people, as consumers, we have to be smart enough in and of ourselves to make our own decisions and look at things and go, you know what, this is BS, or this is not BS, or I'm going to take this with a grain of salt. But the thing that really scares me the most about the time we live in is that people tune out any idea that disagrees with their idea completely.
Absolutely.
And
But
there's not that
is
balance.
also one of the reasons why we have the circumstances. They tune it out because there is too much. There is a flood of what is coming in, and you make a very cogent point when you say people think about it. They don't think about it. The time element in our society for each individual is so fractured by so many things to do that you don't pay attention anymore.
We'll go back to the echo chamber idea that we talked about over the last couple of weeks. I think you can kind of, you can cloister yourself in a place where you hear everything that you want to hear.
Absolutely.
And you know
can.
what?
Yes.
Sometimes you should hear things that you don't want to hear.
True.
And you should open your mind to those ideas because they're important.
We'll not argue that point.
We're not gonna argue that at all.
No.
But I will argue this
Wait a
with
minute. Wait.
wait.
Just a
You want to
minute.
get now?
What the hell's the name of this show anyway? Isn't it Ned Talk? They didn't ask for you. They asked for me. I'm kidding you. You want to shut my mic off?
I thought it was on.
I thought he already shut it off. And the Cardinals have
No.
won the baseball game.
the baseball game.
Baseball game.
Freudian slip there, Stormy.
And we're not
I don't know what it
drinking
was.
either in here.
We'll talk about baseball. We're going to talk about that because John Oliver's here and he's our resident baseball expert. And we'll talk about some changes that might happen with Major League Baseball. If you've got a question, give us a call, 863-7104. It's Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
Ned is in the house.
I'm back, big as life and twice as ugly.
It's Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
Yep, Ned Talk back on the air talking about sports. Let's talk about sports. That's what I want to talk about. How about that? You guys all agree with that we'll talk about sports for a little bit?
I'm in.
Can we not use the word litigious for a while?
Sure.
Can we just skip that for a while?
Yeah, we all had to look that up during the break too really quickly to see what it meant. But I used it correctly, so we're all good there. Let's talk a little bit of baseball. The Cardinals beat the Cubs today. The unusual thing about this game, 7 innings. That's a complete game in these little doubleheaders that are going on right now because the Cardinals, what is the stat, John? How many games do they have to play in X number of days?
Oh, boy. The last I knew, and this would have to be updated, they would have to play 52 games in what I think is 43 days. And
Wow.
They, the thing is, they're amenable to doing so. They're going to try to get as many in. 50 is the ideal number that I've heard that they want to try to shoot for. But, the feeling amongst the players and the front office has said if we can get them in with doubleheaders, other teams are amenable to playing those doubleheaders, then let's get 60 in so that way there's no debate about the winning percentage at the end of the year.
There would be debate if that did happen. I think they're probably going to cut it to maybe 55, somewhere around there. I think Major League Baseball will probably try to reduce it a little bit because the Cardinals and the Marlins are not the only ones now. The Cincinnati Reds are involved with dropping games, and we're getting to the point now in mid-August where it's going to be awfully tough to make them up. I do like the idea of the 7-inning doubleheader. Number one, it's quick. This first game with the Cardinals and the Cubs today, guys, started at 4 o'clock, and it's over practically at 6. That's a 2-hour game. Right?
I don't hate it, Ned. I really don't. Every time one of these things is proposed, obviously the baseball purist in me says, no, it's 9 innings. It's 9 innings. You can't have a full game unless it's 9 innings, unless it goes into extras. But, watching these 7-inning doubleheaders, they're exciting. You see a lot of use of pitching that you wouldn't see in a 9-inning game, and it's entertaining. It really, really is. Joe, I know when we were talking during the break, you mentioned that they were floating around the idea of possibly going to 7 innings for all games. I don't hate that idea, but again, 9 innings is what I'm used to. So again, as a purist, that's just something I've based my baseball knowledge on. It would take me a little bit to adjust to that permanently.
What would be the general consensus among you guys of why a 9-inning game being erased would be more appealing than keeping it the way it is now?
I think the biggest concern with Major League Baseball is time. That's the battle they've always fought. You know, they've tried to reduce the mound visits. They've tried to do things to speed up the game. They're doing a good job with replay this year. It doesn't seem to take nearly as long as it has in the past, but at the same time, you're not shaving off what they've hoped to shave off over the years, Ned. So I think there's a lot of allure to that 7-inning game just to keep people, you know, okay, a game, 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
I think you're altering the strategy of the game. Excuse me, altering the strategy of the game and the pitching decisions that the coaches and manager have to make. I'm one who does not like the idea. I do of the double headers, but I don't of a regular season game.
I'm the same way, and I would agree with you in the fact that, you know, we talked about this as well. You're changing the whole structure of rosters if you go to 7 innings. You don't need the number of middle relievers that you would normally need because a lot of starting pitchers go 5 or 6 innings just about every game. So you need an inning at most unless somebody tanks in the 3rd inning. I mean, how many guys are you going to carry on the roster for that?
Let's talk about this for a second. There's a really good article that Jeff Passan wrote on ESPN about all the questions that Major League Baseball is facing because of the season. And one of the interesting stats that he brought up is that a 7-inning game is 2 hours and 34 minutes on average.
Yep.
That's the butter number right there.
That's the number they've been shooting for.
Those extra 2 innings add up to another 30 minutes of baseball and put you at 3 hours and 6 minutes. So I think that that's what they're going to look at, and they're going to have a nice sample this season. They're going to be able to warm fans up to the idea of these are changes we might make. What do you think of them? And when you sit and you watch a game click by at 2.5 hours and you go, wow, that's great. You know, I think the biggest thing that's going to change is the fan experience at a baseball game.
It will certainly for doubleheaders, no question about that. It makes it a much more appealing circumstance when you, for instance, Twilight Night doubleheader, which doesn't exist really anymore.
Right.
But the day-night doubleheader, which this year does not exist, they have a tendency to run deep into the night. Well, with 7 innings, it obviously does not, and that makes a very big difference in the schedules that individuals need to keep, especially during the middle of the week. But again, I think it alters the strategy of the game to the point where it really takes away from how baseball was formed. So I can't buy the 7-inning regular season single games.
Passan ended his section about the 7-inning games by saying this. One official was asked about 7-inning games, and his answer was succinct, and it was, this is addressing the problem, not the cause. And the cause is away from action, which has been a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it. Hitters are not nearly as good today as they were 20 years ago. And I'm not saying that as an old guy.
Oh, no.
No, you're right.
I'm saying that as a guy that I am a huge Yankee fan, and I would sit there and scream at Mark Teixeira every time that he came up, and they would put 20 guys on one side of the field, and he wouldn't lay down a damn bunt, or he wouldn't go the opposite way, try to hit over it. They could put an army out there and Mark Teixeira, and there are guys on every team that are just exactly like that.
Sure they are.
And the shift and statistical analysis are killing this game. Ned?
Agree.
The shift is part of the strategy.
But they should take it away.
Well, no. Why? Because you're failing to address another issue. Have the players adjust.
They won't.
Well, let's just say you make them. You discipline them. That's what you do. Hell, if they can't do it, then you take away their money. All right, so let's say you have a left-handed batter, and the shift is on. He's a dead pull hitter. Bunt the ball.
Yes.
Or pattern your swing to where you're going to hit a little dribbler, and that's an automatic single, and sometimes a double. You change the strategy of how you address the game, but you don't alter the rules. Not in my opinion, you don't.
Here's where I fall on this, and I look at it as, you know, when you look at a game like the NFL or the NBA, you have to adjust to different styles of defense. So while, Joe, I agree with you, the shift has really hindered that aspect of it, at the same time, these are professional athletes. They're professional baseball players. And I think we've gotten away, and this is probably the baseball coach in me coming out, we've gotten away from some of those fundamentals. Every time Matt Carpenter comes up and hits into the shift rather than bunts down the line, which I'll add, he got a double on last year.
One time.
When he bunted once down the line. If you can't lay down a bunt and you are a major league player, then you need to spend some extra time with the hitting coach and practice.
I watched a game the other day where the third baseman was practically at second base, and the guy still was trying to pull the ball. But the problem is the coaches, the general managers, the statisticians, they say, this is what you do well. You need to keep doing it. It's a problem that is not with just the players. It is a problem with the sport. And that is why I feel, I'm sorry to interrupt you, John.
You're fine.
And Ned, I want your thoughts on this. That is why I feel that they should mandate how many players you could have on a side of the field, because though it's not a rule, it is what was intended, and they didn't think that they would ever have to make that adjustment because they thought, this is never going to happen. And baseball was played for 100 years without it happening.
It's true, and I think, I don't try to point fingers, but where I saw this scale start to slide, and some people love it, some people hate it. I go back to Moneyball with the Oakland Athletics with Billy Beane. When you brought guys into the game that weren't former players, that weren't guys that have been around the game, but rather were statistical analysts that just analyze launch angles, hit patterns. You start taking that traditional element out of the game. And by doing so, Joe, you're exactly right. They've talked about those shifts. They've talked about the percentage guys hit into them. And because that is the overarching philosophy in baseball right now, you're seeing hitting coaches say, just like you mentioned, you're a pull hitter. See if you can get it over them. Whereas, again, my opinion on that is teach them to go the other way. Teach them to hang back a little bit.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. What is wrong with teaching the game the way it should be played, altering the mindset of many of these coaches? Sure, such and such and so-and-so may be a great pull hitter, but they're shifted for him. They're going to stop him. So he goes the other way. And I bring up the point of a guy who played baseball before any of you were even born, Wally Moon with the St. Louis Cardinals. Wally Moon, of course, he was traded over to the Dodgers when they played in the Coliseum. And what did he have in the Coliseum? He had the left field fence, which was 37 feet high and 250 feet down the line.
Yeah.
What did he do, left-handed batter? Didn't practice. He created the moonshots.
Yep.
He changed his swing. He swung late, arced the ball over that screen. They were cheap-ass home runs, but he got them anyway.
That is part of the game.
And Wally, rest his soul, passed away, I think, last year. Athletic director at John Brown University down in Siloam Springs. Former Cardinal rookie. In fact, he was Cardinals Rookie of the year before Bill Verdon was Rookie of the Year. But that's how you do it. You change the player's strategy. You beat that system. Then they'll all go back. Come on.
Sabermetric is such a dirty word to me. And I've heard these two things said recently within the past 5 years about baseball. RBIs, overrated statistic.
RBIs?
RBIs are an overrated statistic. And two, wins don't really matter as far as pitchers go. That doesn't really show you how well a pitcher's doing.
And I think that's the most ludicrous thing in the world, because essentially you're saying, okay, touchdowns are overrated in the NFL.
No kidding.
You're never going to hear anybody say that about that. The
those silly
idea of
dances.
the game, the idea of the game is to score more runs than your opponent. How can RBIs be underrated? That means you're driving in runs.
Oh, and WAR has become this big statistic, which is really an arbitrary statistic. How can you honestly measure wins above replacement? You can't, because I always make this argument. What was the WAR of the guy that Mike Trout replaced? Because when going into that season, he was not their outfielder. It was another guy. He got hurt. Trout played. So what was that guy's WAR?
Right. I agree.
Is it negative? Because it would have to be if Mike Trout was the guy that replaced you. It just doesn't make any sense. Can we change this, Ned? Tell me, what can we do to change this? What would you do if you were commissioner of baseball?
I would allow the game to remain as it is without changing the rules. In other words, I wouldn't ban the shift, but I would suggest to the front offices of baseball hey, look, if they can come up with some kind of documentation and punitive measures to people who are stealing signs, there is now a rule, but there wasn't when the Astros were doing it at first. There was second time. But if you can do that, then you can mandate some kind of a change in the thinking and the coaching of the game. Say, hey, why don't you teach these guys a little bit? Can you make a rule like that? No, because this is a free society. You can do whatever you want. Commissioner of Baseball really has his hands tied. Mm-hmm. His objective has already been stated. He wants to make the game as quick as you can possibly get it done without alienating the fans and bringing them on. Well, concentrate more on that than I would changing the rules of the game.
I've taken some proactive measures as well, just so you guys know. Bill James and Billy Bean have been off my Christmas card list for a few years.
Oh, I hate Bill James. I read a book that he wrote about a serial killer, and he's just as arrogant about that as he is about baseball. I had to finish it because I couldn't believe how arrogant this guy was just in reading this book. Anyway, we'll talk about something else when we come back. As you know, Stormy will report in on what's going on with the Queen City Insane Asylum. I can't wait to hear that, find out what's going on. It's Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
Ned is in the house.
Ah, welcome back to the happy circle.
It's Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
Yes, Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. Stormy sat there silently through the whole last segment. I'm sorry, Stormy. I didn't.
No, you're fine, man.
I was trying to set you up, or you were looking at me to set you up, and I didn't. So I apologize for that. Drop your line. Do it.
Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third, and I don't give a darn.
Let's talk about the Queen City Insane Asylum, your football team.
Yeah, 62-37 win on the road in St. Louis this past weekend.
That was tight.
That gave us a lot more of a challenge. They had an ex-Dallas Cowboy on the other team.
Really? Who was it?
Honestly, as a former Cowboys fan, I didn't even know who the hell he was.
Staubach, something like that.
No, not quite that. Not that I'd have noticed. But the guy I've talked about several times, my little brother Joe Helms, put him on his keister once or twice or three times. And, it was a lot tighter game. Team didn't necessarily play quite as well as they should have, but it was still a good learning lesson for them, I feel. And we did get to play on the old Rams practice surface at Rams Park.
Oh, cool.
Nice, beautiful industrial area. But the building facility was absolutely phenomenal. Hotter than all heck. I mean, it was just raw sunlight. The game started at 3:15 in the afternoon. And just, yes, I lost several pounds. But it was still, like I said, I hope some of the guys learned something from it, and we progress forward to the next away game this weekend, which I'm not quite sure where we're going yet. But like I said, this thing is still building as we're going through, but it's making good changes.
The football team just all gets into Stormy's car like one of those clown cars. They just drive someplace, they tumble out, and they put together a football game on the spot. So that's why the scores happen the way they do. But congratulations, another win for you guys.
Thank you.
Ned?
That makes us 9-0 for the year. So.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I love that.
That's great.
Ned's asleep, by the way. We've got to wake him up to talk.
I've put him to sleep many times over the years.
What do you want to talk about?
I know. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I can talk a little bit about a note that Stormy just told me that the Canadian Football League has shut down. It's a little bit misleading, guys. They were supposed to play on June 11th, and they postponed the season until early September. Well, to do so, they had to have money. So they asked the Canadian government for a loan. The loan was denied. The CFL said, that's it. We're not going to play if
but
we
they
don't
have
get
said
any
they
money.
will be back in the 2021 year.
Well,
so.
they'll be back, but the fact that the Canadian government turned them down for the loan is the real reason why it wasn't. It stems from having a COVID-19 outbreak earlier this year, but not currently now. But, you've got to have the Professional Football League, and you've already sacrificed a quarter of your season. You have to something's got to give.
Have you heard anything about the NFL season, where they're at standing right now?
Well, they are going ahead with their plans. Right now, there has been nothing disrupted. I, in fact, haven't seen a great number of individuals who have opted out now. Of course, they can't opt out now without paying the penalty for it. But for teams being afflicted with an outbreak of COVID-19. I have not seen that. In fact, I haven't heard anything about the Kansas City Chiefs. They had a couple of players earlier, several months ago, but nobody recently. And I would assume that everything is on. Their first game is Thursday, September 10th, and that's 3 weeks from now. They'll be opening up, and come on, bring it on. Let's play. Let's see what happens. Take a shot at it. I think the NFL would be very reluctant to shut down their season.
Yes.
Although they do have the money, they wouldn't have to apply to the government for anything. But it would be a major disruption to the public. And again, the public is of such great importance, and I think maybe some of these individuals take us lightly. But when your whole psyche is disturbed, that does not present a healthy situation, in my opinion. But be that as it may, as of now, everything is on.
And are they still, I know that there's been some split between teams having fans and not having fans. What have the Chiefs decided?
Chiefs decided on about 20%. 22%, is that what it is? And
yes,
that
sir.
would be, I'm going to guess, somewhere in the neighborhood of 16, 17, 18,000, somewhere around there. Originally, they had said 20 and 25,000. But you have to take everything in consideration. Kansas City is a hot spot. There was a spike, and that has to be certainly adjudicated in many respects. So maybe that's why the Chiefs did lower their figure. 22% of 80,000 would be in the neighborhood of 14, 15, 16,000, somewhere around there. I hope fans do get a chance to get in.
And they've opened the possibility up to letting that expand as the season goes on if things get better. So it's not going to be a solid. It's only 22 for the season. That's where we're starting, and that's where we're going to move forward. So that's good to me.
Gee, guys, do you think that's going to be a hot ticket this year?
Well, I'll tell you what they have done by seniority. Season ticket as holders, season tickets assigned by seniority have been given the first choice to buy single-game tickets.
That's fair.
As they turn that down or as they accept it, then the ticket line goes down and so forth. Yeah, I think they'll have the full capacity, whatever it might be, for their games this year. Now, the Las Vegas Raiders have shut things down completely. They're not allowing fans in. And I don't know about the Baltimore Ravens. They initially had said 20,000, but understand they may be hedging a little bit. But I don't think final determinations have been made by all the teams yet as to what the attendance figures are going to be. I hope it is some for all of them.
I'm anxious for football to come back. And it's been surprisingly a quiet off season for the NFL. I mean, not a lot of distracting stories. Granted COVID's out there, but it's been a quiet off season. What do you make of that, Ned?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the circumstances that surrounded the public, with the shutting down of society. We were shut down until sometime in early June. The Chiefs do have one player who's going to serve a 4-game suspension, Bashaud Breeland, and it may be longer than that. And they found out about another one today, Mike Pennell, who's one of their defensive linemen. He may be suspended for a while. The suspensions in either case, I don't know what the background in them is. That hasn't been made public yet. But they will be perhaps missing a couple players, and there are others who have been involved around the league. But I think probably from the greatest aspect of things, it's what we went through in society. A shutdown, the economy being closed down to everybody. Well, you're going to have to remain at home in social isolation.
This is the quietest, I think, an NFL season has started. When you said 3 weeks, I was like, really?
Sure.
3 weeks? I mean, we're going to be doing the pregame shows again this year. And I thought, wow, only 3 weeks till we start working on Sundays. And,
this one will be a Thursday, though.
Will be a Thursday, okay. Yeah. So only, like you said, only 3 teams. We know about the Chiefs. You talked about the Ravens. The Raiders have decided not to have any fans. Have you heard about anybody else?
No,
what they're planning to do?
I'm especially anxious to see what the Los Angeles Rams and the Los Angeles Chargers do, because they're playing in their new stadium this year. And, well, of course, so is
the Raiders.
The Raiders. But theirs is perhaps a little bit different circumstance in Los Angeles, because you're vying for a very important dollar there. I would have to think that Mr. Kroenke would allow a certain number, but I don't know for certain. No.
I watched the Yankees-Red Sox game last night, and that's the saddest that I felt ever watching, other than when they blew that 3-game lead in the playoffs. Because in the Yankee Stadium, they just covered the seats.
Yeah.
And you just had a real empty feeling when you saw
Glad
it.
to hear you say that, Joe, because I have exactly that same reaction. At first, I thought, well, it's okay, they're playing without fans. I can get away with something. You know what? It takes an awful lot away from the enjoyment of the game.
Yeah,
and
that's just
the fans really need to be there.
It's just a stark reminder. It just is. I think it's the bottom line. It's hard to criticize anybody for any decision that they make during this because you don't know. Nobody knows. So if somebody errs on the side of caution, then hard to criticize them for that. If somebody says we need to go ahead, it's hard to criticize them for that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people doing stupid things. Sturgis, let's just go right there.
Speaking of bad decisions, I'd be remiss if I didn't give an update that Antonio Brown, our good friend, has a tryout with the Baltimore Ravens.
So does Des Bryant.
Yes.
They're hosting him for a workout.
John, good to have you back.
Good to be back. I appreciate it.
Stormy, glad to have you with us as always. Ned, I promise I'll let you talk more next week.
You don't need to. No. You don't need to be promised anything. Just don't interrupt me. Just kidding, folks.
If you're
just kidding.
wait, he's got a fist in the air and a finger pointed at me, and he's giving me the KY1 right now. Anyway, if you missed the show, you're just tuning in right now. You can find us as a podcast on the brand new Cave app. It is Ned Talk and 104.7 The Cave.